Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books this afternoon. We have Larry Lockridge with us. He's a writer living in New York City. He's a professor emeritus of English at New York University and a Guggenheim Fellow. He is best known for his prize-winning biography of his father, Shade of the Rain Tree. And he is going to be joining us with Marsha Scanlon, who is a painter and sculptor and illustrator of his covers for his books. And right now I'm going to hand it over to Larry Lockridge to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a little late in the day to be publishing a debut novel. And I might say something about that. I could say simply that the muse was slow in showing up, but there's more to say than that. I'm a son of Ross Lockridge Jr. Who was Ross Lockridge Jr.? You might well ask, and I'll have to say something about him. My father was a very fortunate person. Growing up with all sorts of encouragement from his university at Indiana, for example. He had the highest grade average ever recorded there. He was known as A+ Lockridge. He went off to Harvard. And while at Harvard, he was supposed to be writing a doctoral dissertation on Whitman. He decided, though, that he would duck out of that assignment and start a novel. He hoped it would be the great American novel. And so he wrote and he wrote and he wrote and he wrote. I grew up as a toddler listening to his typewriter, the drone of a typewriter late at night. It was explosive. He finishes his novel, puts it in a battered suitcase, hauls it off to Houghton Mifflin, leaves it with the receptionist, and 5 weeks later they accepted it. This is in spring of 1946. Well, everything that could be fortunate to a writer comes his way. This was an unagented debut novel. It was 2,000 pages in manuscript. It weighed 20 pounds. And suddenly it had won the largest literary prize, the MGM Novel Award. It was a chapter was excerpted in Life magazine, which had never published fiction. It was the main selection of Book of the Month Club. And upon its publication on January 5th, 1948, it was greeted with all sorts of adulation. Some people saying, yes, this is a great American novel. And this is a little difficult to tell, but by that time, my father was severely depressed. Nobody outside the family circle knew this. We children, he had 4 of us, sensed it. And on the night of March the 6th, 1948, just as his novel was the #1 bestseller in the nation, he took his own life by carbon monoxide poisoning. So this is the founding catastrophe of my family and in a sense of my life. I grew up with a novel instead of a father. And to have this, it wasn't just any novel. Herman Wouk recently with the latest edition in 2007 said, hey, this is the great American novel. Well, virtually nobody reads it anymore except people who watch the terrible MGM movie based on it. Some of them read it. I don't know how many got through it. It's 1,060 pages. That's a very, very long novel. No one would wish it longer. So this is it was difficult. People seem to assume, my friends assumed, oh, I would write novels, but of course, who would wish to write a novel if a novel seemed to be the source of dying? And so I just thought I would never write novels. Finally, I undertook an academic career and ended up teaching at NYU for 3 decades or so. And finally decided to quit that job, or as they say, take retirement. And at that point I said, well, I should do something to stay out of trouble, though writing novels is certainly one good way of getting into it. So I have written 4 novels, the Enigma Quartet. They're all gone through heavy copy editing. Marsha has done the cover design and 7 or 8 drawings for each, and they're all ready to go. The Cardiff Giant is the first, and it's just been published, and I'm happy to say I think the production values are great, and Marsha's cover design and illustrations are well beyond what I would ever have thought possible, although I knew it not only possible, but probable given her gifts. So Kathy, that's, what have I left out?
It's a fascinating story about your father. I know that you did write a biography of him, and I'm sure that took a great portion of your life to do that. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, the title is Shade of the Rain Tree, The Life and Death of Ross Lockridge Jr., author of Rain Tree County. I had to put that in because nobody would know who this person was otherwise, except associated with the MGM movie, which came out 9 years after his death. He had nothing at all to do with it. And I would say parenthetically that the movie has nothing at all to do with his novel. But, you know, this is Hollywood. This is what we expect. And yes, I thought, well, there had been a really poor biography published, Ross and Tom, back in 1974, by the novelist John Leggett, who just made things up. He was lazy when it came to doing research. The family offered him all sorts of archives that he just ignored. And so I thought, well, if nobody else is going to step up and write this, I'm going to have to write the darn thing myself, which I did. I began in 1989. It was published in 1994 by Viking Press, and it was quite uncanny to have undertaken this. The writing was relatively easy. It's a 500-page biography. I completed it in a year. That's not a brag. It's just, you know, I was lucky to have a sabbatical. But delving into my own backyard like that was uncanny. You don't know. I mean, this isn't just the experience of me, but anybody who undertakes this sort of thing has a sense of the uncanny as you encounter things that are both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. And discoveries I made, which you would find in the novel, which we need not dwell on here. But yes, it was a voyage of discovery, as the cliche goes. I'm glad to have done it. It was reissued in 2014 by Indiana University Press. So it's still in print, and you know, I hope it stays somewhere in the canon of American literary biographies.
I'll ask you, is your book over 1,000 pages?
This is one of the shortest novels ever written without being a novella. It's, what is it, 100 and Marsha, tell me how many pages this is.
Let me see,
It's
160 pages.
a little less than that, I think, and it's quite
Okay.
legible. You can see how skinny it is. And So it's, yes, I would say it moves along because I wanted to get out of that novel as fast as possible and on to the next.
I understand. I know before we started the presentation, you were telling me about being on set while they were filming the movie from your father's book. Would you like to share some of those stories with the viewers?
I certainly would. The family went down, we invited ourselves, in fact, to Danville, Kentucky, where they were shooting the film in 1956 in Kentucky, because the producers decided that Indiana didn't look enough like itself. It no longer looked like a 19th century lush tropical landscape that my father invented, really. And so it was shot in Danville, Kentucky. We arrived there. This was the highlight, I suppose, of my life to that point, where Elizabeth Taylor gave me a kiss. Okay. We went to the filming the next day. Monty Cliff was there. Liz Taylor, neither of them knew their lines. And there was one point where Liz Taylor was running up the creek and shrieking, and Monty Cliff was, as a klutz, was trailing after her. My 11-year-old brother, younger brother, Ross, screams out, "Mom, is that acting?" And Edward Demetric, the director, cried out, "Cut!" Liz Taylor walks up to him and says, "Honey, you ain't seen nothing yet." Now, I have lots of stories connected with the terrible movie. The screenplay was written by the creator of Mr. Magoo, and I think he did a much better job in Mr. Magoo. At the world premiere of the film in Louisville, Kentucky, I and my family sat right behind Liz Taylor and Mike Todd. It went on and on and on. It seemed much longer than the novel. At that point, it had not yet been pared back. It was more than 4 hours. Everybody was asleep. At the end, there was no applause. And so it was very, very quiet. And we could hear Mike Todd lean over to Liz Taylor and say, "It's your movie. It's your movie." Those are two of my better anecdotes.
That's great. Readers always love to hear those backstage stories, that's for sure. I know that you were telling me this is a quartet of books, and the Cardiff Giant is the first book. And I do believe your illustrator, Marsha Scanlon's with you. Would you like to tell people about your book, please?
The Cardiff Giant, yes. And would you like Marsha to, at any point, to talk about her drawings? But let me say something first about the novel itself. Each of the novels of the quartet, they're standalone novels, but they're interrelated in various ways. So, like Lawrence Durrell with his Alexandria Quartet, I can call this the Enigma Quartet because there are things in common. So the theme of the Cardiff Giant is human gullibility, and it's a farcical novel. It borrows heavily on the conventions of farce. And farce has a prestigious pedigree. We sometimes think of it as a diminutive subgenre, but no, and it goes back to Aristophanes and Plautus, Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, Michael Frayn, Tom Stoppard, Stella Gibbons, and the conventions of farce are, I think, something that human beings on some level crave. So these conventions include parody, caricature, wordplay. In the case of my novels, lots and lots of political incorrectness. My academic books have had to do with what came to be called critical ethics, the relationship of ethics to literature. And you might think that farce couldn't possibly be a moral literature, but I think that the theme of human gullibility is very much with us today. Now, my treatment of this is lighthearted. My characters are gullible, but they fall for stuff that is relatively harmless. I must say parenthetically, unlike the American electorate, or almost half of it. And so there is a residue, I think, of the ethical, or it underlies the novel. And various other themes prop up the other three novels. Perhaps I could read the first chapter, and then Marsha could show us some of the illustrations and talk about the process by which we decided what moments in the novel could be rendered in drawings. Would that be okay?
Yes, that would be great, please.
Okay. Well, it's only 3.5 pages, okay? And I'm going to ham it up. With your indulgence, the Cardiff Giant. I am not the speaker. Jack Thrasher is the speaker. I arrived in Cooperstown, New York in mid-June 2003, 2 weeks after the Cardiff Giant disappeared. Newly hired as an investigative reporter for the Discovery Channel, I was to size up this and other weird goings-on in the famed village. The assignment lifted the torpor of spirit that often befell me. On my own, I'd done little in life, waiting to be prodded, hoping to stumble onto something. My stumbles had yielded an early divorce and a humdrum journalistic career set within the same Midwest venues that bored me even as a toddler. Cooperstown to me was exotic, and you'll see that the village was caught up in one of the few passions of my youth. My new job augured well. I admit to a superstitious streak, and the producers were eager to have superstition confirmed. Enlightenment was bad for ratings. I set about squashing the bah humbug aspect of my personality. Let the ordinariness of life give way to the extraordinary, the marvelous, the paranormal. For those of you not up on your anthropology, the Cardiff Giant was unearthed on a farm near Cardiff, New York in 1869. He measured 10 feet 5 inches and had a 6-inch nose, a 37-inch neck, and an unnerving 5-inch smile. His weight of 2,995 pounds was owing to petrification. This giant was pure gypsum. Within hours, the farm's owner had him on display, charging 50 cents each of the hundreds who came daily to gape. An imposing groin on full view made this something other than your routine Sunday family entertainment. The discovery should not have surprised anybody. Doesn't the Bible tell us outright that there were giants in the earth in those days? The state geologist was on hand to inspect its underside when the giant, sold to area businessmen for $30,000, was hoisted off to Syracuse. There, the exhibit pumped cash into the local economy. The Syracuse Standard ridiculed any and all skeptics. Barred from purchasing him, P.T. Barnum made a fake and exhibited it in Manhattan, setting off a public debate over who had the genuine giant. When an atheistic cigar maker from Binghamton and 2 inebriated sculptors stepped forward to claim the giant as a hoax, many continued to argue in favor of petrification, including the scientific community of Boston. Passed along by many owners up to 1948, he was dumped into a shallow pit at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, where he lay unmolested until the night of June 1st, 2003. After checking into the Otasaga Hotel, I met with its owner, Thor Onstad, a head of the local Chamber of Commerce. I assumed he was of Norwegian stock. A tall, gangly gent of middle age, he began plugging the unmatched treasures of the village, but I sensed right away a weariness beneath his script. Jack, welcome to the great American village. You'll like Cooperstown, home of the Baseball Hall of Fame, Natty Bumppo, the Omegon Brewery, the Glimmer Glass Opera, the Fenimore House Museum, the life mask of Thomas Jefferson, and the Cardiff Giant. That's just for starters, don't worry, no quiz. But we're down one attraction now. Hope you can lend a hand finding our giant. I felt there might be a quiz. Onstad already seemed a nudge, but he was my entree into the culture of Cooperstown, and I needed to be receptive. In the Hawkeye Bar, I asked him to bring me up to date. We were joined by Barry Tarbox, sheriff and local pig farmer. Big mystery about the giant. Everybody's got a theory, said Onstad. Mine's no goddamn theory, grunted Tarbox. Aliens behind this. Tarbox was a stocky, hairy man with a snout for a nose. No sign of burglars. Aliens done it. Snuffed the giant out and hoisted him up to their saucer. Bastards left no trail. Took one of my goddamn pigs too, same night. He guzzled his Kier. Why would aliens abduct a fossil instead of a real live man? And why a pig? I asked. There is no telling with aliens, said Onstad with a hint of the sarcasm I'd learned was his linguistic hallmark. Already clear why they done it, I told ya, said Tarbox. Brought the giant back to life. Sightings all over the county. Giant's been having sex with our women, knocking him up. You watch. A breed of giant aliens. I must admit there's no evidence against your theory, said Onstad, and we'd all like to believe it. That's already 2 points in favor of aliens. Yeah, they're colonizing us. It's a plot worse than faggots and pod people. I'd learned that Tarbox had run for sheriff on a take-back Otsego County platform and was hostile to the usual suspects, outsiders, artists, environmentals, gays, lesbians, and the lame. Whereas Onstad favored an influx of capital and was liberal-minded. And yet the redneck and the entrepreneur were still oddly chummy. Other stuff's been happening, continued Tarbox, lowering his voice to a rasp. Appointed extra deputies to keep up. Crop circle over in No Hollow. Spontaneous combustion on Dog Kennel Road. 2 nuns assaulted by an incubus near Hyde Hall. 5 Presbyterians on a picnic at Gilbert Lake saw the Loch Ness Monster. 3 Shriners on mini-cycles saw Bigfoot near the taxidermist on Highway 23. But maybe that was just a giant. You ought to interview these folks, Jack. Find out for yourself. Spontaneous combustion, I asked. Yeah. By the time we got there, old farmer Buckby was a heap of ashes. Coroner said he was just smoking in bed, but we knew better. They couldn't find the cigarette. That is puzzling, I said, trying to ingratiate myself with Tarbox, yet not come over as a total ass to Onstad. There's talk the Bermuda Triangle's moved here, said Tarbox solemnly. Onstad rose abruptly as if he'd heard enough and punched Tarbox on the shoulder. And can the Los Atlantis be far behind? Jack, you know my old friend Barry may be jumping to conclusions, but it's been one thing after another since the disappearance. Hey, did you hear? You got competition. Abby and Harris, they're moving the morning show up here for the season. I've heard one never watched them, but it's good for business. Tarbox excused himself. Gotta meet with my posse, work on our nets. Nets of varying sizes were being specially woven for the capture of aliens. Jack, said Onstad, allow me to give you a quick tour of the town before dinner. You should see what you're getting into. At the time, this remark seemed innocent enough. Only now, as I reflect on the astonishing events that would follow, do I see that his cautionary words contained a dark prophecy. End of chapter 1. And I would add just a wee bit about what's to come. Tarbox will be hoisted by his own petard, or as we say, by his own aardvark. And when his posse gets wrapped up in its own nets, I had the Keystone Cops in mind. Other members of my cast get the punishments they deserve, just like Dante's Inferno. The mezzo Hazel Bush plots out her performances strictly according to astrology. The psychoanalyst Esther Faderman plots out everyday life according to kabbalistic numerology. The set designer Sheila Drake is committed to all new age notions, and they all pay a price for their beliefs. But this is not to say that the skeptics and rationalists come off any better. They're the ones who are likely to go nuts. And this is where abnormal psychology comes into play. So I don't wish to present just an either or polarity here, where you have the gulls, the gullible people on the one side, and the true blue skeptics on the other. The skeptics have problems of their own. Kathy, shall we ask Marsha to say something about her dramatic drawings and the cover design?
Absolutely. And I want to remind people who are just joining us on Facebook Live, if you have questions for the author or the illustrator, to please type them in the comment section. And we are talking with Larry Lockridge, the author of The Cardiff Giant, and his illustrator, Marsha Scanlon. So Marsha.
By the way, I should say something, by the way, about Iguana Books Toronto, which is publishing these 4 novels over the next 2 years. They've been great, and as a wonderful publisher. And the Paula Kiarkis, for example, the copy editor, put me through a rigorous fire baptism. We had a wonderful dialogue, which I think became a dialectic because the novels were all stronger on the other side of this back and forth. And I'm happy to say that we are still friends.
That's great. That's a good, that's a sign of a good publisher too. So thank you. And Marsha, if you'd like to come on and talk about the illustrations, we'd love to hear about them.
All right. Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Kathy, for helping us with this. The cover, I also feel to thank Megan Basie, who encouraged me to do the covers and to do all the lettering. And she made the suggestion about how to fig leaf the giant. Larry made some suggestions about the face. And Megan finished off the cover in this wonderful fashion. So I've received so many compliments about the cover that I feel to share the limelight in terms of the cover. Okay, first, people have asked how this all got going, Larry and I working together on this. We've been together for lots of years. This is our first project where we worked this closely. And when Larry started to write the novels, I immediately said I wanted to do the covers because I've always admired book jackets. It seemed to me a particular skill. And I'm not sure how we developed ideas about doing all the drawings on the inside. I do believe that was Larry's suggestion. And we started to, we developed a really fun process of rereading the books, the texts with what would make a wonderful drawing in mind. We made lists, we sat down together, we scheduled a meeting, sat down together and went through what we thought would be great. And frequently we agreed on several images for to go with the text, and then we each made our case for other images, and it was a lot of fun and working on them. A lot of it was upstate where we were together all day long. It was easy and it was fun for the most part. So I was, I felt really happy about having the opportunity to do this. My work before doing this project, I had done a lot of work inspired by Aristophanes and Homer and James Joyce and Sappho and Ovid. So you can see it just followed that I would be doing this as well. All right. And that should get me a couple free dinners, don't you think?
Visionary company. Thank you very much.
All right. So I'm going to show you the images that I did for the book and read you just a bit of text. I will try very hard to hold these really still. But you would have the opportunity to buy the book and hold them in your own hand, wouldn't you? Okay. The first one is, okay, there we go. This is, if you can see this, Jack Thrasher, Esther Federman, and Thor Onstad. They are at the Blue Mingle Grill, which is a wonderful way to get started to know the area around Cooperstown. The Blue Mingle Grill is on Otsego Lake, and they're together at one table, and Reuben the cat is at the next table, and you can see they're having quite a moment here. And this is the text. Reuben must have thought I was attacking an old friend. He hissed as he leapt from an adjoining table, digging claws into my right arm. Okay. The next one is Barry Tarbox and Jack Thrasher confronting the English instructor Sam Fuller in Kingfisher Tower. Barry Tarbox has his posse with him. They have their alien catcher nets, and Sam has his group with him. Kingfisher Castle is a folly on the lake, and the public is not allowed in there. So to see it lit up at night is very suspicious. Here they are, about to go at it in the wildest way. This is the text. I hate to disappoint, continued Sam, but we're not alien colonizers. We're the local High Colonics Recovery Focus Group, the LHCRFG. Colonics, not colonizing, Sheriff Tarbox. Okay, the next one is Sheila Drake and Homero, the bat. Let me see.
He's
Tony,
a baseball player.
Ex-star, Tony the Bat Homero, who has an extraordinarily good opinion of himself as a star and a womanizer. Let me see. Sorry here. Yeah, I got it.
Got it?
Yes, thank you. All right. There we go. There they are on the dance floor doing the tango. Homero was now the helpless victim of her will, his face a register of baffled surrender. Proud but pliant, only minutes before, Sheila was now a ruthless dominatrix. There she is. Sheila's one of my favorites. Okay. Next, we have Jack Thrasher locked overnight in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, if you're a real baseball fan, I'm sure the Baseball Hall of Fame is a wonderful place. If you're not a baseball fan, you can get a sense of how it might be a nightmarish situation. Okay, here we go. There you can see them all. This is Jack talking. I approached the baseball cards gallery and was disappointed that naked Sheila had morphed into fully clothed Esther. Esther flung a fistful of baseball cards in my face and said, "Okay, if you must." She went that away. Okay. And here we are. Now, this is one of the gentler, more tender scenes. This is Jack and Sheila out walking together, observing a Jack in the pulpit. Hand in hand, we strolled along the walkway toward the lake access, prompting green frogs to leap for cover. We paused near a family of forget-me-nots and hog peanuts with their purplish green flowers in full bloom. Here we exchanged our first kiss, hesitant, non-invasive, full of promise. All right. And this is the last image in the book. And this is another gala there on Lake Otsego. We've returned to the lake, and there is a new character there playing his fiddle, and this is his introduction. And now, everybody, enough serious talk. I'd like to ask Danny Duranda to honor us with his fiddle. I should be willing to do so, Duranda said politely as he tucked his fiddle under his chin and instantly went into a klezmer bluegrass trance, the wailing and laughing sonorities echoing back and forth from the far recesses of Otsego Lake. I'm not introducing those other characters. Be too much of a giveaway. You have to read the book. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Marsha. I suppose I'll take the throne chair here. So, Kathy, do you have any questions, or would some of our guests or participants have questions? I like turning the old adage around: a good word is worth 1,000 pictures, but that's not the case with Marsha's dramatic cover design and drawings. And I think the drawings capture well some of the more over the top moments in a story that is beyond anything I, for one, could ever have imagined. Can't believe I made this thing up. So
it's a wonderful collaboration. We do have several questions. One of the first ones is, how did the two of you decide which scenes to depict in Marsha's drawings?
Yes, well, Marsha has commented on that a bit. We had this, we each thought about that independently, made lists, and then saw where we agreed and where we disagreed, and worked out which ones. There couldn't be more than, I think the last novel may have 8 drawings, but of course they have to be climactic moments, and also moments that can be well visualized. So that was more or less how we went about it, right? Word image. Yeah.
It's true. And it takes a complete understanding from illustrator to text to be able to bring forth the story the way she has. It's a beautiful job. We have another question from Beth. Did this eclectic cast of characters come to you once you started the novel, or had they been forming in your head for some time before?
Every one of these characters has some sort of grounding in a real person, though these are not Romana Clay as such, but in fact, we knew very well a pig farmer near Cooperstown named Jerry Tarbox. And this is the spitting image of Jerry Tarbox. That's the way he talked. And he had a neighboring farm. We got to know him pretty well, so that's the original of Jerry Tarbox. I can't say too much about some of the characters, as Marsha suggests, without giving the whole thing away. But yeah, there is some grounding in reality for every one of them. This is the trouble I spoke of when I said you can get into a lot of trouble writing a novel. I'm not sure I want all these people to figure out that they are the paradigm of such and such a character. There can be no such thing as a flattering portrait in a farce or a satire. Impossible. So anybody who self-identifies would necessarily feel insulted. My apologies. But no, I'm not apologizing. It's the writer's prerogative, right? I've heard that. I've heard that.
That's right. And I noticed from your reading of the first chapter, you touched on a lot of paranormal things, the giants, the conjoining of alien and human. And you kind of touched on a lot of topics in there. Did you research all this stuff, or was it information you've learned over the years?
I researched it. For example, the numerology, the kabbalistic numerology. How much did I know about that before I began writing this novel? Well, not very much. I researched it, and of course, here I parody it. My character, Esther Faderman, is totally literal in her application of numerology to everyday life, and with self-punishing consequences, which I hope are come over as comedic. Of course, to parody something in one way is to pay it respect. And one of my characters points out, in fact, it's Jack Thrasher himself, who says, gee, I thought the Kabbalah was respected by the likes of Harold Bloom and had a pedigree that is itself worthy of tradition in Jewish mysticism. So it's, but I have it both ways in a sense here. And yes, rebirthing is a big theme also. And well, you'll have to see. The larger theme of all four novels of the Enigma Quartet is identity. This is frequently sexual identity, but it's also something deeper than sexual identity, if you can imagine that, human identity. And I think the character in the series who best exemplifies this theme is the protagonist of the third novel, Out of Wedlock. He's a plastic surgeon. And this is by way of answering your question, how much do you need to know ahead of time to write a novel? Well, you learn as much as you need to write the novel. So a facial plastic surgeon. I didn't rely on the internet. I went to the Bopes Library at NYU and checked out dozens of books on facial plastic surgery. And so in that book, I toss around these terms in what I hope is a funny scene where the protagonist, who is a bungler of sorts, somehow manages to refashion a very terribly wounded person into a rare beauty. there's a fairy tale aspect to this because that simply cannot be done, but in a novel it can be done. And she emerges as a supermodel, having before her accident been, you know, quite ordinary or even homely. So the, yes, identity, but in that novel, as you would see, people may seem to change their identities, but there's a kind of bedrock identity that lingers. And as I say of Esther Faderman, she is a reckless driver, just as she must have been a reckless toddler.
That's true. That's true. The power of fiction is it's a powerful thing to become the creator of worlds and civilizations. I know that this is a quartet. You've spoken briefly about it. Would you like to give us the timeline of the publication of the other books?
Well, this is just an estimate that we've thought in terms of every 6 months or so. I suppose the next one, which is the novel set in Cyprus, which, by the way, we visited. I didn't just learn about that through books. That would be published presumably in the fall of 2021. And then 6 months later, the third novel set in Greenwich Village and Santa Fe, out of wedlock. And then the fourth novel, The Woman in Green, set in New Harmony, Indiana, a site of two utopias, failed 19th century utopias. But the timeline is that the narrator is talking in the year 2050.
I think that's a fascinating aspect of writing a novel too. I think people will enjoy that. We have another question. What do you hope readers will take away from the Cardiff Giant and from the quartet as a body of work once the subsequent titles are out?
I hope that they lift the spirit. They are upbeat, though getting to an upbeat ending requires quite a bit of turmoil on all of the actors, and but that one can maintain one's own identity, as it were, in the face of all sorts of obstacles. Each novel begins with or launches only 7 or 8 characters. I frankly have trouble with novels with so many characters that you have to make a chart to keep them straight. In that sense, I think these novels are easy reads. And these characters have a communal project, usually. It's a kind of quest or adventure. And they set out to resolve some kind of puzzle or enigma. In the last novel, for example, they all take to the road together and they journey through Indiana. You can get all sorts of Indiana culture that maybe you don't wish to know anything of. In reading that novel, you learn a lot about Indiana, I regret to say. So they stick together. Somebody said, you know, your premise here is rather like that television series Friends. Well, I had never watched Friends and didn't know I was reinventing the wheel. I thought that this was an original conception, but of course they don't go on any quest, they just stay in place. My characters go on a quest. There are romantic liaisons that always pop up within the group. There are marriages result, some same sex. And in the end, despite these counterplots, they triumph. And I suppose that's a spoiler, but I hope that these novels lift the spirits, even if perhaps they don't offer profound insight into the human heart. They're not meant to be proofs.
I think that gives us a lot to look forward to. I want to thank you and Marsha for coming on to Zoom into. Would you like to tell people, I mean, I've posted your website link in the Facebook comments. People can go there to find out how to contact Larry and Marsha. Would you like to tell people how to contact you? And another question that we'll have is, do you do virtual visits to libraries and book clubs? Is that something?
No, I have, yeah, this is only the second event as such that I've undertaken. But I have a wonderful marketer, Beth Coleman Werner, who is teaching me the ropes and steering me this way and that way. And I suppose the best source of information, everything else on me is my author's website, www.larrylockridge.com. It's new, so I'm new to this business.
Well, you're a natural, and Beth's a wonderful leader, teacher in this type of thing. And for those of you who are not familiar with Author Connections, I've posted that link in the Facebook comments too. Larry and Marsha, it's been so nice to have you on today. I hope you'll come back to Zoom into Books.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy, very much.
Yeah, just give us an invitation.
Yep.
We have 3 novels coming up. That would suggest to me 1, 2, 3 more appearances on Zoom into Books.
And we can also check into what else you're doing there. So a wonderful project.
Thank you. We'd love to have you back, and want to thank everyone for joining us on Facebook Live. You can watch the YouTube video of Larry Lockridge and Marsha Scanlon on the Zoom into Books YouTube channel. The YouTube video will be out in a few weeks. Would love for you to subscribe, and you can see upcoming events on zoomintobooks.com and follow us on our Facebook page. So thank you both again, and thank you everyone for joining us on Facebook, and we'll see you soon.